everyone, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my November wrap-up, which is coming out almost mid-December, but it is what it is. I've actually been quite busy and in very good ways. I had an orchestra concert, and then I've been preparing for my solo recital, and then I've had just been hanging out with friends, and I've just had really busy weekends. So it's a good thing. Usually when I'm away, it means I'm busy in a good way. So never worry about me. Never wonder where I'm at. It just means I'm having fun somewhere. But also, to be honest, I was kind of tired of reading in November. I am starting to feel like, okay, it's the end of the year. I kind of want to take things a little easier because I just been reading like every single day this year, which has been very fantastic. But I do have a lot of hobbies outside of reading. And I just felt like I was just reading too much. I'm a heavy sports person. Actually, I love playing sports. I love being active. And this year I just haven't really been doing that. Like, I miss playing soccer. I miss bouldering. I miss just like feeling fit. So yeah, I was just kind of tired. And I was just like, you know what, let's just wind down the year and see where it takes us. However, despite saying all of that, I still managed to read 7 books in the month of November, and I even took my time on these, so I don't know how this happened. Some of them are quite like 5 of these books are really slim books, but it's still 7 books, even though I said I was tired. So anyway, let's get started. I'm just going to briefly mention one of the books that I read was Tonbo by Aki Shimazaki. Just briefly mention that that I read this. I'm not going to get into this because this is part of a pentology. This is book 3 out of 5, and I will discuss the whole series when it's all done, because I don't really feel like there's a point to go over them individually. But just know that I've read the 3rd book of the Au Coeur du Yamato series, and I'll update you when I've read books 4 and 5 of that. But I read that. And then I decided to read a play because I haven't read a play in a little while. I decided to read Le Bourgeois, Gentilhomme by Molière. This is a play that I'm not familiar with, but that's normal because right now I'm going through a big French play phase, and I'm trying to go back to my roots and read these plays that I never got to the chance to have experiences with, because I would never had so formal French education that I was able to read these kind of things. So Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme it's a satire. It's quite comedic. It's a comedic satire about this man, Monsieur Jourdain, who wants to become a bourgeois gentilhomme. And the whole thing about the satire is that this is a what's it called? A contradiction, I think, where there's no such thing as a bourgeois gentilhomme. It's not. That's not how the class system works in France. But in any case, this man insists. So he hires private tutors in philosophy and language and sword fighting. Basically everything he thinks that will take him to this level of bourgeois gentilhomme. But this man is kind of a doofus, to be honest. He's not the most intelligent man. And so even though he's receiving this tutorage, he doesn't quite understand what he is being told. So it's just this comedic play about him trying to become this gentleman of great society, and basically all of the shenanigans that come about because he's just very unaware of his surroundings. So he's messing up his marriage with his wife. He's being manipulated by someone he thinks he's a friend. He is preventing his young daughter from getting married to someone who's actually quite a good match. So very comedic. It was really fun. I liked Don Juan better, who's by Molière. This is my 2nd Molière, I should mention. But I can see how this would be very well done on the stage because it's very dramatic. Because of the humor, it has, you know, moments of good laughter. It's actually quite musical, and I think it's probably also a very vibrant play because it deals with a lot of like the Turks and imitating Turkish society, which is quite decadent. So I can imagine that this on stage would be quite a visual comedic feast. So I enjoyed myself, but not my favorite play, or not my favorite out of the ones I've read so far. Another book that I read, I had forgotten my book at home, that I was reading, and I needed something for the train. So I ended up stepping into a Japanese bookstore to pick up a book, something that was easy. I wasn't actually expecting to find something so easy that I picked out. But I went for this. It's called Ahiru, which means duck, and it's by Imamura Natsuko. So Imamura Natsuko, if that rings a bell to you, is the author who wrote the woman in the purple skirt. Yes, the woman in the purple skirt, which I read maybe 2 years ago, I think. And I've wanted to read something else by her, and I was actually looking for the story, or the book that contains the story that was translated recently into English, which is something along the lines of Amico. This is Amico Do You Copy, I believe. And I was actually looking for that one, but I stumbled on this one first. And it was kind of exactly what I wanted, because when I turned the pages, the text is huge. It's so big, and it's quite short. And I was like, okay, this is going to be perfect for the train. I'm going to just read right through this. And I did. I read it in 2 days, basically, just 2 long sittings. And this one took me by surprise because it was strange. So the book is 3 short stories. The first one is called Ahiru, so the duck. And basically what it's about is that this couple one day brings home a duck. And the neighborhood children become fascinated by the duck, and they start coming over every single day, and they start feeding the duck and playing with the duck and petting the duck, and then they sort of create these interactions with this couple. And now the story is being told via the viewpoint of their daughter, who is studying for a medical exam on the 2nd floor of the building. And the thing is that the story is quite interesting. So at first you're kind of thinking, oh, it's just, a family relating to the local children. They're creating this relationship. But then the duck dies. Or basically, the duck is ill, and the duck is taken to the vet. And then when the father comes home from the vet, the daughter notices that the duck looks a little different. But no one says anything. The parents don't say anything. So the daughter just kind of goes with it, and she keeps observing these kids that are playing with this duck that to her seems very obviously different. But again, no one's saying anything. So this goes by, and then again, the duck gets sick again. And so the father brings the duck to the vet and comes back. And again, the doctor says, I think this is a different duck. I'm pretty sure, it's not the same duck. But then again, no one says anything. And the children don't say anything. And then life just keeps going on. And so you're reading the story, and I was like, huh. And it reminded me of when I read The Woman in the Purple Skirt, because it starts off quite simply. It's a part of society that kind of shows outcasts, and it shows people who are trying to help one another and try to build relationships. But the thing is, that book gets more chaotic as it goes on. And I was like, you've done it again. You tricked us. You tricked the reader again. And so it turns into these utter chaos. But here's the thing, that even though I was slowly realizing that, I still wasn't putting it all together in my brain. My brain was still wanting to believe that it was just sort of a ha. Yeah, the duck is different, but that's okay. We're creating good connections. We're creating good neighborly connections. So then you get into the second story. And the second story is called Oba-chan no Ie, which means my grandmother's home. And this story is about a family dealing with their grandmother who lives next door, and the grandmother is sort of starting to lose her mental facilities, and it's becoming harder to take care of her. And the children of that family start to notice that she's starting to talk to herself, and they're just really worried. They're like, oh no, it's the beginning of the end, basically. And so you read that story and you're like, okay, okay, I'm not really too sure where to go with that. But then the third story, which is Mori no Kyodai, which is the children in the forest. Basically, it turns out that third story is connected to the second story, where you're getting the point of view of this interactions with this grandmother from the point of view of two young siblings who kind of show up to her home, but from the back of it. And so they're having interactions with this grandmother, and you start to see like, wait, Imamura Natsuko just pulled a fast one on me again, and she really just changed my perception of everything. So it was weird because like as I was reading this, I wasn't having that much of a emotional connection to the book. I wasn't having that much of a reaction to the book. I was pretty neutral as I was reading this, because I think it was just so easy to read. I was just kind of flipping the pages, you know, turning. I'm like, okay, it's a quaint story, just turning the pages. But no, the author, she was manipulating me the entire time. And now I'm almost angry at her, because then it turns into this like this actually huge sort of message that was in the background that sort of deals with the fact, or like kind of not deals with the fact, but sort of like plays with the idea of sort of replaceability of family, replaceability of things that are supposedly important to you or were important to you. At what point is it okay to abandon something? When are you supposed to keep fighting? And so it's just you just realize that the author played you, and it's almost frustrating and it's annoying, but it was really good and like really interesting. And yeah, I enjoyed myself with this one. So this hasn't been translated into English yet, but I actually enjoyed this one. I think it was pretty fun. And again, the author, she got me so badly. Like she really fiddled with my mind. I'm kind of angry. So eventually I will pick up the Amico Do You Copy. I will buy that book and then read it, because I do like to be able to recommend Japanese books that are available in translation. I keep reading the books by authors that haven't been translated yet. It's kind of frustrating. So I'm like, read this, and then you can't. And it's annoying. But anyway, so before I get into these next two books that are kind of the big juicy books that I really want to talk about and are probably going to suck up all the time of this video, I want to mention I also read two books on PDF on the computer, and they were both by Lewis Stevenson. So first I read Kidnapped, because I had really enjoyed Treasure Island. I believe I read Treasure Island last year. Yeah, I just really had enjoyed it. It was a great adventure story, and because in November I didn't really want to use my brain that much. Like I said, I was tired of reading. I was just like, you know what, I'm just sort of like, you know, wind down, but with some adventure, something fun, something easy. And Kidnapped was an adventure, but it actually wasn't that easy, and it wasn't as fun as Treasure Island, I have to be honest. So Kidnap basically it's actually historical fiction. It's taking part in sort of the era of Scotland where Rob Roy is taking part, and you're having sort of like all the civil unrest within the country, where different factions and different families, I can't think of the word right now, but like families are sort of all fighting against it with each other. And basically you're dealing with this one young naive little boy. His father dies, and his father has left a letter for him telling him to go to his uncle being of quite rich background. Basically his father is also, you know, of rich background, but he decided to step aside and not follow that. So his uncle sort of inherited everything, but the young boy is actually supposed to inherit as well. And the uncle sets him up. To be kidnapped and to be taken away to America. But along the way, there's a shipwreck, and he sort of finds himself back in Scotland, and then he finds himself in the middle of a very famous murder that happened in history, which is called the Apes murders. Now, this whole history, other than like the history of Rob Roy, because I've seen the movies about that period of time, other than that, I am not familiar at all with the history of this time period. So I definitely do recommend a little Wikipedia lookup before you read this book. But basically, like, The reason I didn't enjoy this book as much was just the naivete of the main character. Like, he makes every single poor decision you can make, and which happens, and yeah, that helps push a book forward. But he also like keeps saying the opposite, like what he should do, and then he does the opposite of that. Or like he correctly reads a situation and then he tells them, no, 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 no. Like, no, I'm just being overly cautious. And then he jumps into the situation that he was being cautious about, and for good reason. And it was actually quite frustrating to read that. And it was actually kind of annoying to read. And the thing is, like, the adventure, there were like a few good parts that really felt that had good tension. But overall, for me personally, when it comes to Kidnapped, I just didn't feel the real sense of danger that I felt in Treasure Island. Like, in Treasure Island, even though the narrator is basically telling the book of how he survived Treasure Island, so you know the protagonist lives, but even then there was a real sense of danger in Treasure Island. Like, you really like were worried for the main character. And then Kidnapped just never got to that. It never like pulled me in as much as Treasure Island. And so Kidnapped, it didn't really hit it hard for me. Now, the second book I read on PDF was Catriona, also by Robert Louis Stevenson. And the reason I read that is because I learned as soon as I finished Kidnapped that is a sequel to Kidnapped, basically. Catriona is a sequel to Kidnapped. And so I was like, well, you know what? I'm here now. I might as well read it. And I'm glad that I read it because it is the direct sequel. Like, it finishes, like, not it finishes, Catriona starts like a minute after Kidnap ends. So basically, they really should just be one bind up. I read them as two separate books, but they really should be one bind up. And actually, I do think they're very, very often are put together as a bind up, as they should be, because it's just the continuation of the story. And I have to say, Catriona, I was even less interested than Kidnapped. I sort of pushed myself through that one. If it had been a physical copy, I think I would have DNF'd it. But because it was on my computer, it was on the PDF, as a way to, it's a good way to use my free time when I'm at work. Like, when I'm waiting for something to happen, like, you know, I'll just pull up and read a few paragraphs or like a page or two. But if I hadn't been in that situation, I think I would have DNF'd this book because I just was not interested. So like I said, Catriona picks up right where Kidnapped ends. And basically, so because our main character had been sort of the witness to a murder, he was also suspected of being a participant in the murder because he was so close to it. So the beginning of Catriona basically deals with the trial of our protagonist, and then the second half is sort of like after the decision that was created from the trial. It deals with his sort of like love story with this character called Catriona. And I have to say, and I think the only thing I'm really going to say about Catriona is that I think Kidnapped should have continued on to the end of the trial and then just ended there and just cut off all of the love story stuff. Like, it was unnecessary. The whole Catriona subplot, as I would call it, it just didn't feel necessary. It didn't feel very real. It just felt very forced, and I just wasn't really enjoying myself. So I'm still glad I read both of them. I think I have a better feel for who Robert Louis Stevenson is. So now I've read 4 books by him. But yeah, I mean, I'm a Treasure Island girly, I guess. So we'll just call it that. All right. Going back to the physical books, and these are the 2 books I wanted to spend more time on. The first book that I read was La planète des singes, which is The Planet of the Apes by Pierre Boulle. Planet of the Apes, one of the most science fiction stories out there, and I understand why. I loved this. This was amazing. I never thought to myself to ever look up whether or not there was a book, whether the Planet of the Apes movie was based on a book. I never considered that. And so when I saw this sitting there in a French bookstore, I was like, holy crap. Like, yeah, like, I want to read that. And I was just absolutely fascinated about this. Like, reading this, it makes so much sense that so many versions of the Planet of the Apes story would be inspired by this. Like, it's just so good. It's just so fascinating. It was just so amazing. And it really just, like, even if you've seen Planet of the Apes and you know what the twist to the story is, you'll still be surprised with this. I'm just going to tell you that. But basically, what is Planet of the Apes? So Planet of the Apes is basically, at least for the book, there are these travelers in space who collect they see a bottle floating and they collect it, and it turns out that there is a sort of a testament written in it, so, or a diary, you could call it, where our young protagonist, Arthur, talks about his experience of going to the planet of Betelgeuse with two of his two scientific colleagues and a chimpanzee, and they go to this planet called Betelgeuse, and they encounter humans, but the humans can't speak, they don't wear clothing, they have no ways of communication, they're basically as feral and as wild as it gets. And so they're very, very curious about who these people are. Like, can you consider them human? Like, what is going on this planet? And then one of the humans gets frightened by the chimpanzee that they had brought with them and kills the chimpanzee. And it just leads up to this thing where the natives, not natives is a bad word, the majority population group comes in and rounds up all the humans and captures them. And it turns out, so they've been captured by monkeys, basically. So the monkeys are basically made up of, it's the faction of monkeys. They're chimpanzees, orangutans, and apes. And the difference is that they are the ones that are human-like. They communicate, they have their own language, they wear clothing, they have their own civilization, they live in homes, they produce art, they have a whole diplomatic system, a political system, etc., etc. So basically the humans and the apes on this planet of Betelgeuse have exchanged roles. And Arthur has been round up with the humans, the feral humans, basically. But obviously he's a human from the planet Earth, and so he attracts the apes' attention and is trying to say, no, I'm different, I'm different. And so this creates the whole relationship that he has with the apes and creates this story. And it is so good. It is so fascinating. It's definitely slower paced, I think, than what you might expect if you've seen the movies, because it definitely goes into a more sort of scientific process of like, okay, how do I explain myself? How do I show that I'm not a feral human to these apes? How do I have, tell them that I'm not a scientific anomaly, that I'm actually technically a different race, I guess. So it goes into a lot of that scientific background. But there is so much you can get from this book. It's amazing. Now you can go into the obvious. Basically, you've switched your populations to where the monkeys are the civilized civilization and the humans are the uncivilized civilization. And so you can sort of go into that idea of what happens when the majority becomes the minority. You can go into the sort of the ethics of how humans push science to a point that maybe they shouldn't. It deals with the whole concepts of intelligence and civilization, and it's just amazing what you can get out of this book. Like, you can even you can talk about racial dynamics within the monkey civilization, because there's even a ranking between the chimpanzees, the orangutans, and the apes, or not apes, gorillas. So there is so much you can get from this, and there are so many parallels you can make to our society. You can also make the parallels to racism, class systems, just differences in culture that leads to miscommunications. There is so much to take from this book. I was just enamored, entranced. I really, really, really loved reading this. So good, highly recommended. So, like, it, I mean, the original, what, 1970s movie, I'm not sure, I don't remember how faithful it is to the book, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter to me. I think the book, there's so much to take from the book. There's so many messages to reflect upon that, from the book, that you can create so many movies and still not touch on everything. There are so many aspects to play with, and that, so there's so much you can like have fun with. So I don't know, really, really love that. All right, the last book that I read in November is The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. So The Fire Next Time is basically 2 letters, although really it's just one long letter and then like one like 3-page letter. So I'm not going to talk about the first letter because it's just a letter to his nephew. It's emotional, it's good, but the primary thing you're reading is the letter that's called Down at the Cross, and he subtitles that Letter from a Region in My Mind. So it's not really a letter addressed to any specific person. It's really basically a stream of consciousness that mixes his memories of his childhood, of his young adolescence, and of his young adulthood as he is entering this American society as a Black man, and how he is trying to find a place for himself, trying to find a role for himself that he can dictate for himself, but coming to the realization that Black Americans don't have the opportunity to dictate their own future because of white Americans, basically. And so it's a stream of consciousness that brings all of this together, all of his thoughts and commentary on class warfare, race warfare, even economic warfare, although this is all tied to systematic racism. And it basically just leads to his final conclusion about just the experience of being a Black man in America, or not a Black man in America, about being a Black person in America. Now, I want to sit here and lie to you and tell you that this was the most amazing thing I've ever read, that I understood everything, that everything he said was just, oh. But I can't lie to you, and I can't lie to myself. And I have to tell you, I struggled with this one a lot. Now, I'm not gonna say I struggled because of his fault. It's not James Baldwin's fault. It's me. I just don't have the brain power. James Baldwin has a writing style. It's the type of writing style that I have always been in awe of. It's the type of writing style. It's the type of eloquence of speak, his word choice, his ability to bring so much emotion into what he says, but while still being able to be frank and direct. He has a way of expressing his thoughts that is something that people who can talk like this, again, I've always super respect, and I've always been incredible awe of, because I don't think this way at all. I am not good at expressing my thoughts. That's the entire reason I created a booktube channel, because I'm terrible at expressing my thoughts. So it takes me 30 minutes to express anything. So I have to say I struggled with this, because although the overarching message is obvious, it's clear, it's well understandable, because it's a message that continues all the way to today. It hasn't changed. Everything in this book, nothing has changed. But A, because of stream consciousness, and B, because he has a way of expressing himself that is beyond what I can do, I struggled to grasp what he was trying to say, like in the middle. And I was struggling to follow his thought process, basically. I have to admit that I struggled following the path that he wrote. So connecting all the dots in the way that he connects the dots. Because the thing is, like, I wouldn't connect the dots in the same way. So there were times that, although I definitely agree with the overarching message, I'm not sure if I always agreed with him in the middle or with all of his thoughts or all his points. But the thing is that I can't, because I'm not as good at expressing myself and I'm not as good as expressing my thoughts. Like, I will lose any debate. It doesn't matter how much I know a topic, I will lose any debate. It's just that's the way I am. I'm just not good at that stuff. And so because of that, I can't tell you why I disagreed with him in certain parts. I can't tell you why I thought, no, I don't think that's the way it is. I can't express myself. I just can't. It really was just a feeling. So the thing is, the reason I say all this is because I think it was last year that I read Why We Can't Wait by Martin Luther King. Now, they're both dealing with the same subjects. They're dealing about a Black America. They're dealing about civil rights movements. They're dealing about the power that white people have over Black people's Black American lives, and how the injustice of it all, and how the thing is that it's creating a divided America. He talks about the divided America. He explicitly says it, and again, a very, very beautiful way. He says, white Americans find it as difficult as white people elsewhere do to, that's the wrong page. It's the next page. My bad. Okay, here's the page. In short, we, the Black and the white, deeply need each other here if we are ready to become a nation. If we are really, that is, to achieve our identity, our maturity as men and women. To create one nation has proved to be a hideously difficult task. There is certainly no need now to create two, one Black and one white. Martin Luther King says basically the exact same thing in this book. But the thing is that Martin Luther King, for me in this book, he was so clear. He was so understandable. It was almost like he had a bullet list, a checkpoint. And you could go through every single of his thought process and you could be like, yes, exactly that. Definitely that. Okay, that makes incredibly logical sense. But this is so stream of consciousness that, and because it mixes his own experiences and his own doubts and his own fears and his own exploration, for me, the message wasn't as clear. But there were definitely a lot of thinking points. So I think there was quite a long section where he was talking about the church, because at one point James Baldwin had tried to sort of enter the church to become a preacher, and he talks about how it sort of all became like a charade. It all became a performance. And for me, I really latched onto that part of this letter, basically this text, because I myself have always wondered why Black Americans are religious and why they follow God, especially Christianity in the U.S. Christianity in the U.S. is a very white religion. Jesus isn't white, but Christianity in America is very white. And so I always wondered why Black Americans were religious, why they were basically following this white God. For me, that never made sense. It's like, I ask my friend here in Japan all the time. He's Japanese, he's native Japanese, but he's a Christian. And we have this conversation all the time. I always ask him, why do you believe in a foreign God, basically? Like, this is not your God. If it was your God, he would have come to Japan a lot earlier, basically. So what makes you believe in this foreign God, basically? And so I've always wondered about the Black population in America, why they're Christian. Why do you follow this foreign God? He's not your God. He's not here for you. The American God is not here for the Black population. So I never really understood that. And I think he is very good about his expressing his feelings about that same idea, that same concept. Then there was he has some really beautiful things that he says, and I think his ending is very strong. So there's these few sentences he wrote. The American Negro has the great advantage of having never believed that collection of myths to which white Americans cling, that their ancestors were all freedom-loving heroes, that they were born in the greatest country the world has ever seen, or that Americans are invincible in battle and wise in peace. The Americans have always dealt honorably with Mexican and Indians and all their neighbors or inferiors, that American men are the world's most direct and virile, that American women are pure. Negroes know far more about white Americans than that. It can almost be said, in fact, that they know more about white Americans, what parents, or anyways mothers, know about their children. So I really love the fact about how he is really good about saying how the black population probably understands the white population probably better than the white population understands themselves, and definitely more than they understand the black population. So there's really so much to get from this book, but I just have to admit that I struggled personally. I think I would definitely benefit from a reread of this book. I think I would need to reread it even slower than I read it. Like, this book is only 80 pages long, and it took me a week to read it. It really did, because I took my time. But I think I could go even slower with it and get a lot more out of it. That's it. I don't know how this video worked out. It's been a while. But yeah, I guess. Thank you so much for watching and for listening to me ramble for, holy crap, 41 minutes. All right, ending this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.